That, I'm not a rationalist, I'm an empiricist. I think there's a very important difference with thinking about thought. Empirical thought is about seeing whether something is true, experimenting with it, finding out, testing it. And sometimes rationalism can be superstition. You know, you can say rationally that you have this, like Pascal had a rational theory of light, and it took Newton to poke a hole in some cardboard.
Right.
And that's the empirical way of saying, no, it's just look. Clear thinking, which is a phrase that, as you know, I value highly from Bertrand Russell.
Hi everyone. So, Stephen Fry. Now, I'm a fan. I've watched hours of QI and Blackadder, as many people have, of course, and he's certainly a talented actor and comedian. I also think he's cultivated an image as a thinker and intellectual, and as we just saw, he talks about being a clear thinker and an empiricist. Yet despite this, not as he thinks because of it, he has a blind spot when it comes to the monarchy. So there are two interviews in particular that I want to show you, and as we watch them I'll pick up on what Stephen says and tell you why I think he's wrong on the monarchy. The first is an interview on the Rubin Report, speaking to American presenter and commentator Dave Rubin. The second clip sees Stephen chatting with Susan Ormiston on Canada's CBC. So let's see what Stephen has to say on the monarchy.
Countries that have kings and queens, which are rationally stupid, weird ideas, are empirically freer and more socially just than countries that don't. Consider that. Look at the world now. Look at social justice, happiness, freedom and equality in the world, and you're thinking Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Benelux countries, and Britain.
Stephen is repeating an argument that I've heard many times before, and there are so many problems with this point of view. Firstly, it simply isn't true. Now, there are lots of different ways in which you can measure the success of countries, and there are loads of reports out there, loads of different indices and lists and tables saying which country is more democratic, which countries are freer, more prosperous, more equal, and so on. Now, yes, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, these countries are in those lists, and they're usually quite high up in the top 10 or top 20. But then again, so is Finland, Ireland, Iceland, Germany, France, Switzerland. These are all republics. So the best you can say is that both monarchies and republics are in the top 20 and in the top 10. He does very specifically claim that countries with kings and queens are freer and have better social justice and are more prosperous than those that don't, and that simply isn't true. These countries prosper and are peaceful and stable for all sorts of reasons that have nothing to do with the monarchy. Now, there is another really important point, that he is talking about Sweden, he's talking about Norway and Denmark, but you can't throw Britain in there. You can't simply say, well, look, all these monarchies are at the top of these lists, and therefore Britain must be great as well because we've got a monarchy. The problem is, and Britain is great for all sorts of reasons, but we don't make it into the top of those lists. Now, there are lots of those lists out there, as I said. So there's a table on political stability, and we aren't even in the top 20 of that list. Political freedom, we're not in the top 10. The democracy index, which is put together by The Economist, we're not in the top 10. Corruption index, put together by, I think, Transparency International, and we're not in the top 10. The rule of law index, we're not in the top 10. Britain has a whole load of problems, a whole load of issues to do with excessive power of government, to do with the limitations on our democracy, for example, which stem from us having a monarchy. Now, we don't have the Danish monarchy or the Swedish monarchy, we have the British monarchy, and the British monarchy is absolutely central to the British Constitution. The reality is that stable countries have monarchies because they are stable. They aren't stable because they have monarchies. So these countries like Norway and Sweden and Denmark, they have made it through those wars and those crises with their monarchy intact, and they have then had 70 years of peace and prosperity, and the pressure has simply gone away. But they have not been peaceful and prosperous because they have a monarchy. That simply doesn't work. There's no mechanism, there's no cause and effect, there's no explanation that makes that a credible argument.
which does have very high levels of social justice, and Holland. And these countries have kings and queens. And
So
they
that's
have
interesting.
constitutional monarchies. So it isn't, that's what I mean by being empirical.
Right,
Well,
that's a tough...
I'm not saying, therefore, you must have a king and queen in order to be free, but all I'm saying is having one doesn't stop you from being freer, from being opener. I mean, these are very open societies, Denmark and Sweden and Norway in particular, incredibly open societies.
So there's a bit of a straw man argument here from Stephen, which is saying, well, you don't need a monarchy to be free and open, but having one doesn't stop you. Well, maybe not, but that's not really the argument. The argument against the monarchy in this country, and there are similar arguments also in places like Sweden and Norway, is that we aren't as open and democratic as we should be. And there's an awful lot of secrecy, particularly in this country, and particularly about the monarchy. So the argument isn't get rid of the monarchy and you suddenly create a utopian society which is, free and open and all the rest of it. It's very specifically about this particular institution, and in this country it's saying it is a blockage to serious reform. It is a source of centralised power in Downing Street. It is also itself, on its own terms, failing to live up to the expectations of public institutions. And we'll come on to that in a moment. So Stephen Fry's conversation with Dave Rubin then moves on to other issues, but let's see what he has to say about the monarchy when he spoke to Susan Ormiston. And this interview was a couple of years old, and you'll see that it's already a little bit dated.
The marriage of Meghan and Harry, he says, reinforces the key to success of the monarchs.
One of the remarkable things about the British royal family is its adaptability, its ability to survive. And although it's preposterous, it works terribly well.
So this is another fallacy and another common argument of, well, it works. And you'll see from Stephen's later comments, it's all about, oh, well, it works for us. We're British, it's all a bit odd and a bit quirky, it's a bit ridiculous, but it works, And the notion that it is extraordinary that this institution adapts is a bit strange, because most institutions are able to adapt and do so much better than the monarchy does. There are constitutions and institutions such as the US presidency, which is going through a tough patch at the moment, but it is the same institution as it was 200 years ago, and it has adapted to changing times. The British Parliament has adapted to changing times, of course, as have many other parliaments and institutions around the world. But the British monarchy doesn't adapt. It's pretty much the same institution it was 60 years ago. Yes, okay, it takes on new technology, it has a different approach to the media, simply because the media has changed, and therefore it has to find a different way of doing what it used to do, which is to protect itself, to guard its secret. Some of the mechanics of the PR has changed, but the institution itself is very rigid and simply doesn't adapt.
Every week had to go up Capitol Hill to a sort of white colonial building in which Uncle Sam lived, who was the embodiment of America, and Trump had to bow to him. So Trump wasn't the most important person in America. This embodiment, Uncle Sam, meant more than he did. It would just show him that he was the servant of his country. And that's what a British Prime Minister has to do. Every week they have to go to the Queen, and it just keeps the politicians in place.
I mean, this is one of the greatest fallacies of monarchists and fans of the royal family, this idea that it is a check on the power of politicians. I mean, it is anything but. Prime ministers are powerful, egotistical people. They are not cowed by a visit to a monarch. She has made it very clear she's not going to take any action independently of the Prime Minister. It's perverse that he's using America as an example, because in America, Trump isn't the most important person. He may think he is, but the most important people in America are we the people. It says it right there at the top of the Constitution. We the people. And they don't need this person to go to. They've got the Constitution to go to, and that tells you who is the most important person, or who are the most important people. It's not Congress, it's not the Supreme Court, it's not the President, it's the voters. They are the most important people, and whether he likes it or not, Trump is subject to the voters' opinions and their judgment. And that is the way it's going to happen every time, every 4 years, every president is going to be subjected to that, and during the course of their term they will continually encounter, as Trump has, the Constitution that says no, you can't do that. You can't just do this law, pass this law on a whim. You can't tell Congress what to do. You have to work within very confined limits on your power. And the thing is, because of the British monarchy, the British Prime Minister, in terms of domestic power, is one of the most powerful leaders in the democratic world. So it is simply completely back to front to say that the monarchy has this sort of role of putting people in their place. It simply doesn't happen.
Because they've got this image, this personification of the entire country and its history, a living flag, if you like, who goes around in a coach. And it's kind of preposterous.
Kind of.
Yeah,
Many would say it's completely old school and should be abandoned.
Well, there you are. That's like political correctness. Should. There are no shoulds. I think if it works, it's very foolish to get rid of it, even if it's unreasonable.
So, this isn't clear thinking on behalf of Stephen. It is emotional and romantic thinking. I mean, this idea is also wrong, empirically wrong. This idea that we need this human symbol of the country, why do we need that? We have a flag. The United States has a flag. A flag is a symbol. That's all you need, is a symbol that doesn't need to be alive. It can just hang there, blowing in the wind if it's outside, and it represents the country's values and history. And that's enough. Because what the United States has and what France has and what Ireland has and Germany, they have a written constitution which does the rest, which says these are the things which we believe are important. This is how we want to govern ourselves. These are the limits on power. And then we're back to this, it works. And, it's if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But the problem is that the monarchy is broke and it can't be fixed. It has to be got rid of. But the idea of it works is such a low bar to set for an institution. I mean, lots of institutions work, but are we going to reduce this to it works when we should be saying, who does it work for? And how well does it work? And can it work better? Because who it works for in terms of the monarchy, it works for the royals, of course, very well, and it works for the British government and the Prime Minister particularly, and his ministers. It gives him huge amounts of power. And it then provides a cover, a shield, if you like, against serious democratic and constitutional reform. We have standards, we have principles, we have values. Do we say, well, it's not democratic? Oh, well, that doesn't matter, it works. Do we say, well, it's secretive? Well, but it works. Do we say, well, the royals are constantly abusing public money? Yeah, but it works. Do we say it's really expensive? But it doesn't matter, it works. Do we say it centralizes power in the hands of the government? Yeah, but it works. So what's the problem? Of course it's a problem. It works is not an argument. And it doesn't work well. It doesn't work for us. It certainly isn't empirical, as Stephen likes to claim. So as we get to the end of this particular interview, Stephen starts to talk about things which are already very dated just 2 years on.
No, I'm fully aware of how preposterous this is, and you're quite right, it is. But it works. It works for us. It adds to the gaiety of nations.
And does Meghan bring an interesting dimension?
Yes,
I mean, this is theatre.
That's
this
your
is a
question,
new piece
and
of theatre, and
but
somebody's going to pick up on
It's
that.
also a reflection on changes. It's not just like, oh, I suppose we better allow it. It's kind of, everyone is thrilled for an injection of new blood, just in the sense of a new attitude, a new generational, a new way of looking at things. And I think that is what I meant about the adaptability of the royal family. They just somehow always seem to catch, and it's nearly always the women. I mean, our best monarchs have been Queen Elizabeth I and Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth II by far.
So, again, it works, but it's also apparently adaptable, and he talks about Meghan coming into the family and how the royal family, in his view, adapts and brings in new blood, has different approaches to things. Now, there are a number of things to say about this. Aside from anything else, it makes absolutely no difference to the rest of us what they think or what approaches or attitudes they have. It's meaningless. I mean, it doesn't matter if someone who is cutting a ribbon or looking at a plaque has a different opinion on something. It makes no difference to us whatsoever. But of course, since this interview was recorded, this point has been disproven very clearly, and it's Meghan Markle and before her Princess Diana, women who weren't part of the royal family marrying into this family, and the family did not adapt. They were not prepared to change. They were not prepared to make accommodations for these women who had a different view, who wanted to be more gregarious or more open or more engaging with issues or with the media, and it fell apart. It didn't work. If you want an adaptable institution, have a presidency. Have a system where you can choose different people that reflect different values, that reflect, changing society. Because the Queen doesn't do that, Prince Charles doesn't do that, but I'll tell you who does, and that's the President of Ireland, for example. In the early 90s, Ireland elected Mary Robinson, who was the first woman to be President of Ireland. And then a few years later, they elected Mary McAleese, who was the first president from the north of Ireland. And then 14 years later, after 2 very successful terms as president for Mary McAleese, they elected Michael D. Higgins, who is a inspiring, charming, very intelligent, articulate man. Now, that is how you have an institution that can adapt, can bring in new blood, can reflect changing circumstances. So no, this is nonsense. And Stephen, if I can say to you directly, this is not empirical. This is not empiricism. This is not clear thinking. This is romanticism, muddled thinking. What you're doing is you are fond of the monarchy, you are fond of the royals, and so you're reaching out for an argument that you've heard which makes some kind of sense on a superficial level. But if you want to be empirical about these things, you can't just pick random arguments and just sort of make vague and sweeping assumptions about things. You have to actually look at the detail and look at the evidence. You're friends with Prince Charles, but it's that if you are an empiricist and a clear thinker, then that shouldn't count for anything. You should be able to say, well, actually, to be honest with you, all the evidence points that this institution is corrupt, it is secretive, it is undemocratic, gets in the way of democratic reform, it centralizes power in the hands of the Prime Minister, it's unprincipled, it stands against our values and principles. So I'm sorry, Stephen, but I'm not upset with you. I am disappointed. This is not empiricism, this is not clear thinking, it's muddled romanticism, and you are wrong. I'm sorry. Now, that's it from me for now. Don't forget, get in the comments if you disagree with me, if you want to comment on anything I've said, if you want to agree with what I said or make any comment you like, get in the comments, get a debate going, and I will be doing more responding to comments videos in the next week or so. And of course, republic.org.uk is our website. Go and find out more about Republic. And of course, you can also send comments, questions to YouTube at republic.org.uk. Bye for now.